Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third and last session on this series focusing on grant writing. So today we're going to be looking at the last session on this topic, and what I was hoping that we would do is just a quick recap. I won't spend a lot of time on that. And then that will be followed then by the two main aspects that I would like to focus on today. So we will look a little bit on the budget and how you can put together a budget in a way that ensures that your budget is in line with your narrative. And then also looking at the actual project or the research sustainability. Because as we know, funding is not forever. So you fund it for 3 years, for 2 years, for 5 years. What happens beyond that? Okay, so I'm going to go to presentation mode and then we can continue. All right, so this is what I would like to call the art of making funds chase you. So you're interested in applying for funds for a particular project that you're interested in, but that initial project, that initial funding that you get is actually the gateway, if you will, towards future funding as well. Because what tends to happen, they always say money follows money, right? Money goes where money already is, which then means if you are successful in securing funding, it becomes somewhat, it's not automatic, obviously, you still need to do the work, but it becomes somewhat easier in future when you apply for more funding. Some of the funders would want to know whether you have some history of funding. And if you do, already that works to your advantage. So how do you make funds chase you so that you're not always chasing funds? All right, you can only do this if you make sure that you have a brilliant proposal, a brilliant budget within that proposal, and with all of those things combined, then you are well on your way to ensuring that you are successful in securing your grant. Okay, so from theory to praxis, from putting together a proposal to actually doing the work, from the idea that you have about a particular issue that you want to investigate to actually doing the work, that brings some solutions. And when you are working on your research grant, your application, make sure that you do your homework. Who are the other people that you may know who have had funding before? Who is this funder that you are approaching, that you are seeking funding from? So when you get the call, when you hear about competitive grants that are available, do your homework, find out the history of the grant, find out as much information as you can about that particular grant that you are applying for. Might there be other people maybe that you can get in contact with who have successfully applied for that same grant that you are interested in applying for? Is it possible for you to be in contact with them? How did they go about putting together their own proposals? What was their approach? What is it that was the winner about their proposal? Okay, so do your research and do your research and do your research. Okay, so that already on its own provides you with some ammunition in terms of ensuring that when you work on your own proposal, you already have this information that will assist you in knowing how to approach your own grant proposal. All right, and then when you are working on a research grant, and here I'm just doing a quick recap because in the past two sessions, I spoke at length on these issues, so I just want to touch on them quickly as I then move on to the issues that I want to focus on today. So conducting targeted research helps you to find the right funders to partner with and support your research. So you don't just go for any funding that is available. What is that funding about? What is that funder's interest? So make sure that for the kind of work that you're doing, you also seek right funders. When the calls come out, identify, familiarize yourself with the calls for funding and check whether that call, that funding, is in line with the kind of research that you're interested in, right? So if you have targeted research, which I trust you do, because you all have specific research focus areas that you are busy with, that research focus area is your targeted research. That's what you're doing research in. That's what your work focuses on. That's what you're interested in. And having that focus, that narrow view, helps you to find the right funder. Okay, so when you send funding proposal to the right funder, that is your key to finding a match. All right, so your interest, the interest of the funder, your priorities, the priorities of the funder must align. They must be in alignment. Okay, and then as I've already indicated in the previous sessions again, you need to present a logical solution to a problem. So you identify a problem, you come up with an idea of what you would like to focus on, and then you go on and indicate why this is important. And this has to be presented in a logical manner. Okay, think of your proposal as a story. Stories have got the beginning. In the beginning, this is what happened. This is how things came about. This was the issue. And then it moved on to this, and this is what happened along the way. And as a result of this, this is what then happened at the end. All right. So when you watch a movie, for example, how does the movie start? What happens in the middle? And how does the movie end? Right. So when you think about a narrative, when you think about a story, think about that kind of bridge when you are working on your own proposal. Think of that story. What story are you trying to tell me as the reader, as the person who's reading your proposal? Okay, and of course, the idea with your proposal is that you want the funder, the reviewer, to see from reading your proposal that you know what you're talking about, that you know what you're doing. The proposal should demonstrate your clarity and understanding of the need in your community, the need in society, the need in the research field, and how your work is going to provide a solution or a response to that, what kind of program that you're going to bring if you're provided funding to do this work. So after the funder reads your proposal, they should feel confident that you would be a responsible and competent steward of their funds. If I'm going to give you $1 million, I need to be confident that that money will be used responsibly. And it has to be clear to me how that money is going to be used. And I have to understand that the money, and this has to come clear, this has to become clear in the proposal, that people who are going to be working on this project are competent people with relevant skills to be able to work on this phenomenon that they've identified. Present a solid plan. Highlight the skills of you as the the principal investigator, but also the team members as well. You did not just invite people to be part of your project because they are your colleagues, they are your friends, but because they actually have something to offer and they have something to contribute in ensuring that the project is going to be a success. Okay. And as I've indicated, the budget is an integral part of your proposal. tell the same story, that narrative that you're telling in the actual proposal in the beginning, the description of your research, tell that story in the budget as well. Often, people who apply for funding do a lot of work. You do the background information, you read the literature, you engage with what the problem is about, you go on at length in describing why it's important for us to do this work, why it's important for us to give attention to this particular phenomena, how you're going to go about doing this research, the steps that you're going to follow, and what you're hoping to achieve. So all of that, as I say, you know, at blood, sweat, you spend days, you spend hours working on the proposal. And it's beautiful, it reads well. I can see from the introduction, there's a background, it's clear why this is important for us to consider, to think about, to give attention to. All of that is in place. And then at the end of the proposal, you put together a budget. And the way that the budget is put together will tell me as the reader whether this budget was an afterthought, or as you were working on the proposal itself, the heart of the proposal, you did that while you had the budget in mind at the same time. So it was not an afterthought. So as I look at the breakdown of the budget, as I look at how the numbers have been put together, as I look at what items have been included, that will give me an idea as the reviewer whether the budget is an afterthought or not. And as I said in the previous session on Wednesday, that if the budget is not in place, if the items in the budget are not aligned with the actual proposal, the heart of the proposal, the description, then that shows that you are not, how can I put it? It shows that you have not thoroughly thought about your project in its totality, right? And that is a very big mistake. As I said, you have an opportunity to again reiterate on the story, but doing so by showing all the different items and numbers that are going to be required for you to be able to do this work. This is how, again, you're going to demonstrate your credibility. Why there's a need for a research assistant, or 2 research assistants, or 3 research assistants. Okay, so here are just some examples that I've quickly taken online just to give you an idea. So most of the proposals, the funding, the grant proposals would have these kinds of items when it comes to what is it that's going to be needed. But remember, this budget is going to be determined by the actual work that you're intending to do. The work that you're going to be doing will determine what will be included in the budget. So, for example, are you going to be needing any personnel? Your collaborators, how are they coming into the work? Are they coming in as team members who are going to be working with you? Are there any costs involved? Are you going to be using some of the colleagues as consultants due to the expertise that they have? So how do you define personnel and who's going to be involved in that regard? Okay, so the research personnel, who is going to be included there, and how many personnel are there? So you see the quantity, and then also the percentage of time. So you start by indicating the duration of the project. Is it going to be 12 months? Is it going to be 24 months or 2 years? Or is it going to be 36 months or 3 years? So based on that, you also need to think about how the length of the project will be linked to the percentage of time that the person is going to be required to participate and do work for the project. Remember, oftentimes you find that you have other duties. Your research project is not your full-time job. It's part of other things that you do. So how much time are you going to be dedicating to the project? So the principal researcher, the PI, the principal investigator, It's usually one person, because then the project would then have that person's name and then have the co-investigator or co-investigators. Do you have co-researchers? How many co-researchers are you going to have? And these core researchers, how much of their time are you going to require for the project? And as a result of the amount of time that is required, what would the honorarium or payment, if there is going to be any payment as part of their involvement in this project, going to be? And then research assistants, are you going to be needing research assistant? Will they be part-time or full-time? Because that also determines how much money they're going to then be paid, right? Per month. And then the postdoctoral associates or postdoctoral fellows, as we call them at UNISA, would those be needed as well? How many and for how long? Graduate students, again, capacity building, will you be recruiting students for this or not? And then other professionals, are there other people that are going to be required as part of this project? So again, here, linking back to the actual research itself. Are there technicians that are going to be needed? What are the specific things that you've indicated in the actual body of your proposal that would make me see that, okay, the technician will be needed here, a programmer would be needed there, statisticians, all those relevant people that might be needed, and for what reason, at which point in the program. Would you be needing statisticians in the second year? How much time would they be required? And then based on that, how are you going to make calculations? Would you check with your institution what the rates are for paying people? Is it per hour, per project? How does that work? Right, and then administrative assistant, would that be necessary? And then how many people are you going to need? Right, so that all of that is personnel, and then you indicate, okay, so for personnel, I'm going to be requiring this much, and this is the amount of time, and it's going to be so many people over this period of time. Okay, and sometimes with some funders, understanding that if you are an academic, you are still earning your salary, and many institutions actually frown upon academics earning extra income from their funding. You can get money to do activities for your research, but not necessarily get paid for the research project that you're doing. However, with some funders, they do create space for one to get what we call augmentation of their salary. Okay, so there could be those added benefits as well, where you can budget for an additional amount of money, even though you are a full-time employee. But obviously, you need to also check with your organization or the institution that you are affiliated with on what's allowed or what's not. Because remember, when the funding comes, it's going to be managed by the institution, because funders would not put $1 million in your own personal bank account. The money would go to your organization, it will go to the university, and they would manage the funds as per the finance policies of the institution. So if, for example, you had added that there's 25%, there's salary also linked to that, that need to have been justified, and then the university can also make a determination as well. So these are some of the consultations that you would have beforehand, so that there aren't issues or challenges after the fact. Okay, so that's just one example of a proposal template and some of the things that one can think about in terms of what is it that you can include in a budget when you're doing research. And as you can see from this example of this budget on the right-hand side, it's very personnel heavy, right? Very personnel heavy. So now when we look at the other budget on the other side, so there's personnel, there's direct expenses, there is also travel as well. So with personnel, again, if you've contracted people, if maybe your project is based at multiple locations, you are in this country, but your research is also involving work that needs to be done in another country, another context. So obviously you can decide, would you be traveling there and spending time there, or would you be getting maybe contractors, interviewers, people who are in the field in that particular context? And if that is the case, then you need to include in the budget how they're going to be paid, how much they're going to be paid, how much time you're going to require them. Okay. And then also there is usually an opportunity for a person being released from teaching. So if I make an example, let's say with myself, if I applied for funding, I'm supervising students, I'm teaching, I'm doing research, so I get funding to do this huge project. Some funders understand all these multiple expectations that are there if you are an academic. So then there is also that opportunity that you can request for a replacement. So you speak to your institution so that you can be given time off. So you can be given a term or a whole semester off, and the funder will then pay for your replacement during the time that you are just focusing on the research. So maybe you take 3 months or 6 months so that you focus on the research work, so that you're not juggling too many things. And then in your budget, you indicate that there's going to be cost release for you as the private, I'm not sure why I keep saying private investigator, as the principal investigator, so that you don't have your time being divided in a way that makes you take longer to complete the work. Okay. And then summer stipends, this would be something that would be applicable in contexts such as the global north, the Europe and the US, because some researchers would use the summer period to do their research because the summer break tends to be quite long. So, and ideally the summer break is supposed to be the time when a person is taking time off and resting. So because you would be doing research during that time, then you can apply for a stipend during that time because you are working. Okay, and then again, there are research assistants, and so all of those would be personnel. So it's very clear that this is personnel. And then it would have been identified also in the actual project description how all of these things fit in. All right. And then direct expenses as it relates to the actual research itself, transcription of interviews, translation as well. If maybe you're doing quant work, maybe statistics and statistical analysis or statistical consultants, and how much that's going to be. And then the direct expenses, again, if you are going to be going to a conference to present your work, if you have to travel to the research site to go and conduct the research, speak to people. So all of that you also then budget for as well. So there was a question, I'm not sure whether it was Wednesday or Monday, where someone was asking about whether you can also budget for things that are unforeseen, right? So you'll see here with this budget here, there's also what they call the overhead. So the overhead at 10%. So total expenses, $124,000. And then you budget 10% of that as well. It's okay, $12,000. That is the money for things that I might have not mentioned here, but that might be needed. Okay, so what I'm requesting, therefore, would not be 124 as stipulated in the different items, but also that 10% as well. That will then cover other things along the way. Okay, and many funders accept that. Okay, so this is just two examples, two of the many examples of how you can think about putting a budget together. Like I said, usually when you apply for a scholarship or you apply for a bursary, you will find that the budget section, sometimes it's already pre-populated. So what you would need to do is to then fill in the other sides. You need to fill in the amount and the subtotal. You need to fill in the quantity and the total. But in terms of the items, because the funder already knows, because UNISA, for example, in this case, already knows what it can and cannot fund, then the budget section of the application is already pre-populated, and then you will just indicate it which of the items that are there on the template that's been provided for you would be applicable for your research or not. So obviously, if you're doing qualitative work, there are certain things that you would tick that you would not tick if you're doing quantitative work. And the same with quantitative work. If you're doing that, there are certain aspects that you would tick that you would not tick as a result of the kind of research that you're doing. But even though there's a pre-population in terms of the template that's provided for the budget, there's again usually an opportunity. Often at the bottom of the budget section, they would say any other item or other. So you're also given an opportunity to maybe add something that might have not been included in the budget item. And then obviously then the funder, when they review and evaluate your application, they would make a determination of whether this additional thing or things that you've included are worthy of consideration and being supported as well. All right. Okay, and remember, funders are people. So it's not just something that just floating in the air, but it's people. You want your proposal to be successful. If anything is uncertain, if you have questions, maybe you have consulted with other colleagues, but you still remain with questions, pick up the phone and call. You will note that all the funding calls have got a contact person for inquiries, for questions. Call this number, email this number. All right. So if they've given a phone number, that tells you that they are okay with you calling. Sometimes you might send an email, they might respond, but sometimes you also maybe just want to speak to someone so that you can get clarity immediately. Okay, and sometimes you might even be having your proposal in front of you and asking specific questions that if I do this, should I do it this way? Obviously, they're not going to assist you in putting together the proposal for you, because after all, it is a competition. There are other people who are applying, but there are certain aspects that they will be able to assist you with as you prepare your funding proposal. Because it is people who are going to be reading and reviewing your work, and many funders, many funding organizations have got people who are trained, who've been working with these funding calls and reviews and management of funds for many years. So it can only be to your advantage to pick up a phone and call if you are uncertain about anything. Okay, so they will help you, and most of them would even appreciate the initiative of you calling because it shows that you are interested in ensuring that you follow what is required. You want to make sure by the time you submit something that is in line with what they want. Okay, so that is the budget. And then one other important thing about applying for funding is the importance of sustainability. Remember, I said funding has got lifespan. Funding is for a year, 2 years, 3 years, if you're very lucky, 5 years. Sometimes it can be for 3 years with the possibility of renewal, but that's very rare. So you need to think about sustainability beyond the funding period. If after 3 years, the work is still not completed, what's going to happen next? All right, so the sustainability plan, where you provide a paragraph or two, an explanation, where you speak, you show the funder that you've thought about the work beyond what they're going to give you. Right, so it's this plan, the sustainability plan, it describes how your project will be sustained in the long term. If you're going to be dedicating a lot of time and effort and resources towards a particular idea, and sometimes you come up with a plan and you're hoping for a particular result, which you may get, but remember, as a scholar, as a researcher, you're always thinking about how to make things better, how to come up with something that's useful. So while you might come up with an answer, you don't want to stop there. You also want to think about what are other things, other ways in which we can continuously think about programs or ways in which this particular issue could be given attention. Okay, so here you're not only talking about community sustainability, you're also thinking about financial sustainability, and you're thinking about organizational sustainability. At UNISA, for example, one of the pillars is sustainability. And that's why the university also has what they call seed funding, right? So I give you the money. I, as the funder, give you the money to plant a seed. But to ensure that this seed grows, it's nurtured, whatever tree or flower that then starts growing does not die along the way. What is it that you're going to do to ensure that this plant that's going to come from this seed that you would have planted continue to nourish? Community sustainability, we do work alongside in relation to together with the communities. So you might be doing work right now with the aim of getting a qualification. You're going to get your master's, you're going to get your PhD. But you also need to think about research work beyond just the qualification to say, what is the sustainability for the community that I'm going to be getting the data from, that I'm going to benefit from for this qualification that I'm doing? So how is the work that you're doing going to continue beyond you being there? So let's say, for example, you work with a particular community, and that's where the seed is planted. So what mechanisms, what processes would you consider putting in place to ensure that even when you have left that community, there continues to be sustainability, the work continues, what you've started, what you've planted, you've provided programs and skills and knowledge base, whatever it is that you would have provided, that would enable continuity after you are gone. So sustainability, I would like you to think of it as community sustainability, financial sustainability, organizational sustainability, right? As I said, the funders, understanding that they won't be able to give you money over and over and over again, they're also interested to know that the project will survive and thrive beyond the money that they've given you, beyond in the long term. So what they would have started would continue. So they are assisting you on this journey with the hope and expectation that you're not going to be reliant on them for the long-term success and sustainability of this work that you're doing right now. And like I said at the beginning, let the funds chase you. So again, as part of sustainability, you're thinking about how are you going to do this work in a way that is going to lead to funds chasing you. And this is now linked to how you're going to be planning possible sustainability of your work. So that later on, when this funding stops, or when this funding is about to stop in the third year or middle of the second year, you're already thinking about applying for other funding. What is it that you've got to show this potential funder, this other potential funder, that would then convince them to also give you money as well? It is possible to have multiple funding for a long-term project, but often for you to get the second and the third funding will be dependent on that first funding as well. And this is where then the sustainability becomes very, very crucial and central. It spells out how your project will survive in the long term, like I said, and it provides those assurances on ensuring that the money will be well spent and that the project will not end abruptly when the funding also ends, which unfortunately has been known to happen. We've seen that happen, that the funding stops now at the end of 2022, in December 2022, that's the end of the cycle for funding. And then you're scratching your head thinking, oh my goodness, but we have not even completed the research. What are we going to do? So now you're going to come to a halt until you can secure other funding. But if you had already pre-planned, then it might be easier for you to actually not have a project that just comes to a standstill due to money. Okay, so financial sustainability, as I've said, how you're able to maintain and continue your work beyond the funding. Will you be applying for more funding? What have you thought about? What is in place? Okay. Okay, I've already just explained on this. And so I will continue then beyond financial sustainability. Institutional organizational sustainability, again, proper working systems that were developed as part of the project. Who are you going to be working with? Are the systems in place? Will you get access to the resources? If you're going to be doing lab work, do you have access to the lab? For how long do you have access to the lab? Will there be some interruptions along the way? So all those things as well have to be well thought out. Did you seek permission? Whose lab is it? What conversations have you had? And has that then been part of the planning for the project that you're putting in place? Okay. And then the program itself, it's sustainability. Like I said, if your funding is ending in December 2022, what happens then? You're able to continue your project and programs in the absence of donor support. What is your answer to that question? Okay. And then just lastly, an overview of project sustainability. When you're thinking about project sustainability, you're thinking about community support. Is your work based in the community? You're working with the community. Do you have the community's buy-in? And if you have the community's buy-in, what are the implications when the funding has ended? The continuation of the support in working together with the community as part of project sustainability. Okay. How you're going to then be integrated into existing systems that are there and the political support. So again, here it depends on the type of work that you're doing, but also understanding that many of the things that we're doing, again, very political, right? Monitoring and evaluation and the sharing of the results. Also very, very important, because when you monitor and when you evaluate, looking at where you are, what are the challenges along the way. So again, that formative and summative evaluation. You don't think about the evaluation only at the end of the program, but you're also thinking about evaluation at different intervals during the lifespan of the project. If it's a 3-year project, you're not going to wait for 3 years before you start thinking about evaluation and also monitoring along the way. If you're working with collaborators, are they busy doing what they're doing? Are they Is there progress? Do you need maybe to travel to go and check if maybe you've got field workers, like I said on the first session? What is that going to entail? Are those things that you're thinking about? So in terms of evaluation, because those things also determine the sustainability of the work that you're doing, so that there aren't any hiccups along the way that may bring the project to a halt. Okay, and if there are issues or challenges, someone is not available anymore, something happens along the way, have you thought about possible ways in which you can adapt, right? Adaptability of the approach. Is it possible to have that adaptability of the project, so that you ensure that if there are issues, the project will continue to be sustained? And this is, again, something to think about for those of you who are busy with your proposals right now, going to apply for ethical clearance and understanding that you've got clearance to do work in a particular way, in a particular area, and you're hoping that you're going to get access, and you're hoping that you're going to be able to get the data in the way that you have planned in your proposal, but also understanding and being realistic to know that it might happen that when the time comes and you start with the work, you realize that there are challenges along the way which may require you to think of adapting the approach that you had initially wanted to take. Okay, so it's also very, very important. Okay, and staff, you have appointed and you have a research assistant, and often because this is a contract appointment, when you get a research assistant, along the way, maybe a person might get another opportunity, or because yours is a contract appointment, they might get a permanent appointment. Also, you might lose people along the way. What will happen in that case? So really try as much as possible. Obviously, you cannot anticipate everything, but try and anticipate as much as possible, so that even if there might be challenges or glitches along the way, because those may happen, that they are as minimal as possible, but also that they are as less destructive to the project as possible. Okay, and I've spoken about multiple sources of funding. So this is just an overview of how you can imagine and think about project sustainability. Project sustainability in the sense of a funded project, but also you can think about this project sustainability in the context of your own master's or PhD project as well. Put together a plan in your head and think about all the possible eventualities and how you might adapt as a result of that. Obviously, there are certain things that we cannot really plan for, like, for example, what happened with COVID. It's not something that you can really plan for, really. And so that requires a different kind of rethinking and reimagining the project. But other than that, those that are possible for you to think about as potentials that may negatively affect your project, you need to think about that and think about ways in which you can put adaptive approaches in place. All right, and then finally, before I open up for comments and conversation, I thought I could give a quick example of one of the templates that are used by one of the main funders in South Africa, and this funder being the NRF, the National Research Foundation. The National Research Foundation funds postgraduate students. So if you're doing your master's, or if you're doing your PhD, or if you are an emerging researcher, or if you are a woman researcher, or if you are a rated scholar, or if you are doing specific, specialized, scarce skills type of research. So if you go to their website, you'll see all the different programs and projects that they fund, but they fund masters and doctoral students as well. And so the online application process for the NRF is quite it's quite hectic, if I can put it that way. It requires a lot of time, and it requires you to really apply yourself when you work on this application. But the beautiful thing about it is it's actually something, the hectic work of populating the online template for the NRF is that you do it once. And 10 years down the line, you still have the same profile. Obviously, in 10 years, you would have done other things. So what it allows you to do is that you can keep updating. It's called an online CV, but a very specific, dedicated online CV that is specific towards different forms of research and skills and expertise. And with all the different types of funding that are available from the NRF, you can always just tweak and add. And when an application comes up, or when you are interested in applying for a particular research funding, the actual CV is the beginning of all of these applications. And then the only additional thing that you would do is the part or the aspect linked to that particular funding that you're applying for. But other than that, then the CV would be there, it would remain the same, and it will form part of the application, regardless of what fund you are applying for. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of the NRF. And so I would really like to encourage you to consider creating your profile or this online CV on the NRF website. Okay. So just in a nutshell, this is just one of the many funding opportunities offered by the NRF. This one is called the Tutuka Grant, okay, for research projects. So even for you, as you're doing your PhD, like I said, in your master's, you can apply for the NRF. So this is just some points or items on the website itself that you can expect when you go into the online platform and look at the kind of information that is required. So project information. So what is your work about? Details of the research. What research do you want to do, right? What research have you done? What is your research about? So there's also a general information around your own personal research. And then if you are applying for a particular funding, then the project information or details of that particular project you're applying for would then be required. And again, here the pre-population, if you will, or the specific topics that are already available on the site make it somewhat easier for you to know all the different parts of the proposal, of the funding proposal that are required. So you don't have to worry about that. So here you have it, what's the potential impact of the work, and then the problem statement. And again, if you remember on day one, I was talking about also the length and the importance of ensuring that you only provide what is required. Be clear, be concise, right? Focus on what the issue is. So if you have to provide a problem statement, provide a problem statement, and nothing else. So with this online application process, there's characters that are predetermined. So you can't go beyond what they require from you. So which I think is good, because then it forces you to draw within the lines, if you will. And then the rationale and literature review, you speak to that. So you can put together your online CV. You can go and check and look at this outline, and then maybe take this outline, work on your application offline, but remember, when you work offline, you're not going to get a sense of how many characters you're actually putting together in that paragraph or those 2 paragraphs. So you can work offline, and then after you work offline, then you can input the information onto the online platform. It's up to you what works best for you. Okay. And then the aims and objectives, as you can see here, it's in line with all the different aspects and requirements of any form of research project or research proposal. The methodology and proposed research plan, there you have it. And then details of the research, again, that alignment, and also thinking about the priorities of the country, and also thinking about taking into consideration the NRF, the history of the country, and understanding also the work around transformation, but also support in terms of ensuring that the support is in line with the transformation agenda of the country. Okay, so anticipated outputs: are you going to write a book? Are you going to complete your studies? And that's the output that you will complete your PhD. And as I said, details of how your research is aligned to the national imperatives. Details of the research on the data management and utilization. Okay. And then also supporting documents that you would need to put in. Attachments: has the study already received ethical clearance? And then also the preferred panel, and here we're talking about reviewers. And this is an interesting thing about the NRF, that with the NRF, as the applicant, you're given the opportunity to suggest reviewers for your work. So if you're doing work in a particular field, if you're doing work in nanotechnology, if you're doing work in like water purification and nanos, you say, okay, who are the scholars that are experts in this field? And then you can suggest those people as the preferred panel, and explaining why you've chosen this particular person and that particular person. So you have that opportunity to actually play a role in the determination of the reviewers for your work. And then the budget, called financials here. What are the operating costs? How much are you going to need? What are you going to need? Other sources: do you have other funding? What other funding do you have in place? And what is that funding going to cover for you? And again here, if you have funding already, that puts you in a very good light. Doesn't mean you're going to be disadvantaged if you don't have funding, but of course it's to your advantage if you already have some funding. And then student resources: are the students going to be involved in the project? Capacity building: how's that going to work? And then student support as well. Are you also going to be requesting for money to pay for fees for your students? Like, for example, if I, as a professor, have NRF funding, as part of my application for the funds, I can also request for financial support, maybe for 3 of my master's or PhD students. So under student support, how is this project also going to assist the students? Obviously, whatever work the students are doing has to be in line with the project that I'm going to be working on. So capacity building also then happens at that level as well. Okay. And then national infrastructure platforms, I forget what that's about, my apologies. Science engagement. The science engagement is also about communicating your results, not limiting the work that you're doing also within academic platforms, academic spaces. Attending conferences, presenting at conferences, but also publishing work in spaces outside of academic platforms. Participating members, are there other people involved here? And then the references as in literature references, but also references as in other people who can provide reference for you and support your application. And then the CV, which is online, as I said, which will also then include some of these registration details. Are you registered for a master's? Are you registered for a PhD? Are you an emerging scholar? And if you're registered, who are you registered with? Who is your supervisor? All that information, contact details, and then career profile. If you already have a profile as an academic, what qualifications do you already have? And then your research expertise. What is your research focus area? What expertise do you already have? And if you supervise student supervision records, how many students have you supervised to completion? And then personal profile, where you speak a little bit, you provide a narrative about who you are as a researcher, and also information about absence from research, if you've been absent from research, if maybe between 2008 and 2014 you were away from academia and then you came back. Before that time you were in academia and then you left and then you came back. So providing some explanation for that, or for some women academics or women researchers, you might find that maybe they took a break to go and start a family and then they're coming back. For the longest time, it worked against women to take a break and have families, which obviously, as you can imagine, has got a lot of very problematic connotations to it in terms of justice and gender justice. Because if I've been absent from research as a result of starting a family, for example, and then that works against me when I apply for funding, then that also limits my progress in academia as a woman researcher. And these are some of the things that have been rethought, if you will, if it's, I don't know if that's the right word, but there's been a rethinking in terms of acknowledging how we need to look at these things and how we need to provide support to researchers in ways that are not discriminatory. Okay. And then other information, academic information also, disability, if there is any, having to speak to that. And then if you've published any books, chapters, articles, do you have any patents, conference outputs? Again, here, all of these things form part of that online CV that I was talking about. Products, artifacts, prototypes, and other recognized research outputs. Do you have any of those? And if you do, you input those onto that online system. Okay. And with that, I would like to thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of that presentation, and I hope that with this, it gives you an idea in terms of the example of how an online template looks like and the kinds of information that would be required. So as I said in the first session when we started on Monday, that when you are applying for funding, do not wait for the last minute. When you are applying for funding, give yourself time. Treat it with the seriousness that it requires. And I think with this example that I've just given right now of the NRF, I hope that gives you an idea in terms of the amount of work that one would need to input to be able to then create an online profile oftentimes before you even then start thinking about the actual funding that you want to apply for. So if you think, for example, about putting together a personal profile, it's not something that you can just do like that. You have to think about what is it that I would like to highlight in my profile that would be in line with the kind of research that I have, that is in line with what I've achieved as a scholar up to this point. And also, again, it's that telling of the story, that this is where things began for me, and then I built on that, and then I moved to this, and as a result of that, this is what has happened along the way. I got a scholarship, I got funding, I was recruited as a PhD student. All those things play a critical role in terms of telling a story about who you are as a scholar, about who you are as a researcher. But also, even if you're still a student and maybe you already have publications, you've worked on research projects, all that information can form part of your personal narrative, which will tell the reader, which will tell the reviewer that this is what this person brings in. This is the kind of history and background that this person has when it comes to research history, research focus, and also the potential for success going forward. And if all of that is in place and is very clear, then it also brings some comfort, if you will, to the reviewers to say, okay, we can entrust this person with this funding, and based on what has been presented to us, we can see how the project will probably or possibly be a success and well managed as well. Okay. All right, so with that then, I'm going to check if you have any questions for me or any comments even that you might want to make that I can share with other students as well. So please, it's not meant to only be questions, but maybe there are comments linked to what I've spoken about, or some examples that you have that I can then maybe share here with other students, because I believe that learning happens, it's reciprocal. And if there is something to be learned from you, I would appreciate that very much as well. Okay, so Moraba, in putting up the budget proposal, how do we go about in auditing the funds? Okay, Moraba, that is a very good question. And the nice thing with this, it's going to depend again where you're based. It becomes easier if you are based within an academic institution, right? So for example, with me at UNISA, when I get external funding, the money gets transferred into UNISA's account. It gets transferred into UNISA's bank account, and then UNISA will then create an account for me. Okay, and then that then serves as an identifier and a marker, and then in that way there are records that can be kept. So this is housed in the finance department of the university, and then I have an account there at the financial department. So when it comes to auditing, it becomes easier, because if I need money to go to a conference, I have to go through the university processes of booking a flight, getting daily allowance, booking accommodation. So all of that will be done by the university's travel system. So there is a paper trail in that regard. And then it will show that 15,000 was spent for accommodation, 20,000 for booking a flight, going abroad, daily allowance was this much. I went to the research site and I drove my car so many kilometers. I put up a claim and the university gave me this much. So all of that gets recorded in the university system. In that way, it actually makes my life as the researcher easier, because then I don't have to worry about auditing of the funds. And with all those records, if I go to the research site and I use money, then I keep the receipts, I submit those receipts to the university. So there is a record keeping in place. And then what happens is when the quarterly or financial or mid-project report happens, I provide the narrative of the work that I've been doing, and then I contact the finance department and say, I need a financial report linked to my account, linked to this particular funder, because sometimes it may happen that I have funding from 3 different funders. So in that way also I can be able to keep track of that. And then it makes life easier. So within an academic institution, that's how the auditing happens, and it makes things very easy for you as the researcher. And as the student, for those of you who've got UNISA bursaries, you know also that there are forms that you would complete, and if maybe you had editing services or transcription services and you paid with your own money, there are forms that you would need to complete for the university to reimburse you, and then you would also submit quotations and receipts as well if you've used the money. So all that paperwork, again, the student funding administration of the university will put that together to ensure that when it comes to reporting on student funding, all those things are in place, right? So the same would apply for the NRF, for example, which funds researchers, which funds students, and depending on how then the money is given, that will also lead to who will be doing the auditing. So that's how then the auditing is done. If it's an external organization you're working for, an NGO or an NPO, I would imagine that there would be a finance department as well that is working on ensuring that all the auditing is done to ensure that when the reporting happens, there is everything in place when it comes to financials and counting for each and every penny that has been used, for accountability to the funder, of course. Right. Who's responsible to conduct the audit? I've just said, are we supposed to put the budget in case we hire auditors, or simply say evaluators? As I've said, no, you will not be expected, you cannot put on your budget that you're going to get auditors that are going to audit the work for you. If you are attached to an academic institution, so if you were to apply for funding as a master's or doctoral student, and you get funding, what I know, unless if maybe someone can provide a different experience, but based on the experience that I have, when a student gets the funding, the money would then be given to the university to then manage for the student. But I know at least of one foundation or institute that gives the money directly to the student, and often in that case, because of the difficulty of ensuring auditing, so they would say, we'll give you 100,000 rand for your studies, so for whatever it is that you ask for the money for, what we expect in return is a satisfactory report. So if we've given you a scholarship for your studies towards a PhD, for the research, this is what you've promised. We're giving you money for the next 2 years. And what we require is a satisfactory progress report. And what we require is for you to complete the qualification by the end of 2023 or by the end of 2024. So the agreement, the contract that you would have with that funder, the person who's giving you the scholarship, is that should you not complete your qualification by the agreed upon time, then you would be expected to pay back that money. So that's how that would work if the money is given to you directly in your own personal bank account. So that's what would be required from you. So maybe in the first year, you will write a report saying, okay, these are the challenges. This is what I've accomplished. I've completed 3 chapters. I've completed 5 chapters. Things are going well. But it's also very important that if there are glitches along the way or challenges, which may happen, make sure that in your report you indicate those things, because what that's going to do and how that's going to help you is that should you not be able to meet your contractual obligations, let's say at the end of 2023 or 24, when you said you would have finished your studies and you didn't, then you can be able to say, as I indicated in my previous reports, some of the challenges that I've had as a result of that, I could not finish. You cannot say that only at the end. There needs to be a track record showing that there has been challenges along the way that have led to you not being able to finish your studies. Sometimes the funder might even consider paying for you for the extra year or that extra term that is required for you to finish. But that requires you to be very transparent and be very honest. Things happen along the way. Maybe it's personal, family issues, but sometimes it's also actually professional issues where maybe there are challenges with your supervisor. Maybe along the way you had to change your supervisor, which then impacted the progress of your study. Anything that may happen that may cause a delay in your studies, make sure that all of that is recorded and included in your progress reports, because at the end, that will come in handy. Okay, so that is if the money is given to you directly. But if the money is not given to you directly, like for example, often with the NRF, the money would be paid into the university account, then if it's done that way, then you know that the paper trail and the auditing is sorted, because for each and every cent that the university will give you, you need to account for it. It's either you use your own money and then you ask for reimbursement, or if the university gives you money, they need also some paperwork in place for them to give you that money, so that when the reporting comes, all of that is in place. Okay, Moraba. Okay, are funders, or do funders have their own format of writing progress report? Many funders do, yes. They do because it makes things easier for them. They know what it is that they're looking for, and as a result, then they provide a template. So when the time for the progress report comes, you will get notification, or if at the beginning they have indicated when reports are due, then they would also include the reporting template and say this is what you need to submit for your reports. So it would be very specific in terms of what they require. Most funders do that. Not all of them, but most of them do. And for those funders who do not provide a template for the writing report, then obviously that gives you the freedom to be able to structure the progress report in the way that you deem fit. So you have here to decide for yourself and be very deliberate in terms of how you structure. So you would speak about the budget, obviously, in terms of the money used. You would provide a bit of information in terms of the progress that you've done with regard to the actual project itself. And like I've just explained, also make sure that you include the challenges that you've encountered, but not only the challenges, and don't just dwell on the challenges. What are some of the highlights? The funders also want to hear, what are some of the unexpected things that came up? What are some of the highlights? Even if it's just one main highlight, you got invited somewhere, there's an initial result that has come up that is showing potential for something else in this work, in this project that you're doing. So what are some of the exciting things? So provide the highlights, provide the challenges, provide a summary narrative, and say something also about the budget as well. Okay. All right. Can I source funding from the municipality as they have budget for research, since my topic is analysis of district development model and its implications of service delivery. Yes, yes, and yes. I would encourage you, Moraba, to please go ahead and apply for that funding from the municipality. It will be good for you to get that external funding. As I said, having funding will in future lead to funds chasing you. So you'll have that as something you can tick and hold on to say, I've secured funding before from a body outside of the university. So definitely, if it's possible for you to source that funding, go for it. That would be very, very important, and it will be to your advantage in the long run as well. Okay, so please go for that, and all the best with the work that you're doing, focusing on analysis of district development model. And the implications on service delivery. Very, very timely topic, very, very important topic, especially in the current moment that we're finding ourselves in trying to think about ways in which we can reshape and shift service delivery and get to a point where services are provided consistently and in a way that assists people to be able to move on with their everyday daily activities. So yes, definitely, and go ahead with that. Where, okay, you use municipality as your focus area. Can I approach them? Please do. Please do approach them, Moraba. Okay. All right, Anonymous, very good presentation. Thank you. No, thank you very much. I do not see any more questions or comments. But I'm also very happy to see, and I'm hoping that you're already thinking about possibilities when it comes to the work that you're doing and possibilities around funding that might be possible and available for you to consider. So don't limit yourself and don't box yourself within UNISA only. We have many students. There's thousands of students registered for masters and doctoral degrees, and there's limited funding when it comes to bursaries. So it's important for you, and I'm hoping that with this week's sessions, you will start thinking about the possibilities of considering external funding for your own studies. And like I said, it will not only be just that funding, but it will be what that funding will open up and do for you going forward. Especially if you are someone who's interested in becoming an academic, in becoming a scholar, that can already build towards your portfolio. All right. Okay, then. If there aren't any more questions or comments, I will ask that we call it a day and wish all of you a very, very wonderful weekend. And I look forward to engaging and connecting with you in one of the future sessions that I will be facilitating. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.